Namaste and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity Yoga. And we're going to continue answering questions from the jar or doing our best to do so. I'm just going to reach over and grab a question. Still have quite a bit of questions in there. Of course, these answers are never perfect, and nor are they meant to be perfect. They're just meant to be an expression of what I've been able to assimilate over the years and that I wish to share. Not even so much wish to share, feel compelled to share. So I will set my timer as I take a deep breath, trying to save a second here. The breath is to remove any ego or any other notions that I, as a little me, have the answers to everything, because I don't. This is basically internal answers that we all have the access to. We just have to practice. How does confirmation bias hold us back? How does confirmation bias hold us back? I'm thinking of a quote from William James. It goes something like, a great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. A great deal of people think they're thinking when they're merely just rearranging their prejudices. In other words, we're all kind of hooked onto our convictions and our prejudices without realizing that we are. And confirmation bias is this idea that we've been so conditioned to believe something is true, and we can't see beyond it. So if I think in scientific thought, for example, the idea that consciousness actually exists out of matter is a very controversial. It's called the hardcore problem of science these days. Consciousness, right? The hard problem of science. We can't see consciousness, but we can see matter and feel it with our five senses, but we assume that all that we are exists in this matter. We can't see beyond it. And if that becomes our confirmation bias, if that becomes our conviction, that becomes our idea of what is true, anything that differs from that is going to be met with a certain degree of bias. It's going to be a certain degree of prejudice. I don't believe that's true. I think that's woo-woo or unscientific or not true. And so what happens is that science will go to prove that it isn't true. But when they don't get the evidence that distinctly says it's not true, but they do have a lack of evidence, they'll call that not true. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that a lack of evidence in something is a lot different than having the evidence that clearly states this isn't true, right? A lack of evidence of something being true is a lot different than proof, data, research findings, experimental findings that clearly state that something isn't true. But what science seems to do is, because it has not been proven true yet that consciousness exists out of matter, they say it doesn't. Because in their mind, matter is matter. And I'm speaking, of course, the materialistic sciences out there. So that is a form of confirmation bias. In a more generalized way or a more practical way, we can say, okay, I really think that person is unkind. I really believe that person to be unkind. And I will be seeking, through my confirmation biases, things that confirm that individual is unkind. I'll be looking for the things they do that look unkind. I will not be focusing on the things they do that show they are kind, or the things they've done in the past that they're kind, because my conviction is so strong in me, my mind automatically wants to prove it and reinforce that. But what we think is a strong conviction then is really not strong at all, is it? Because the mind's always trying to protect it. The mind sees the weakness in it. But for some reason we've established as a sense of our safety and security system, I need to believe in this. Otherwise, who will I be? What will life be? What will the world be like if this belief is proven untrue? So we do what we can subconsciously to constantly collect data and evidence that something, that our conviction is right, and you don't necessarily deal with the truth of the other. Not, with the fact that we don't have enough evidence to prove the other thing is not right. So it's kind of a oxymoron, but we do cling to our prejudices, even though we say we're trying to look for the truth, and the truth, of course, is very holistic, and it's not right or wrong, good or bad, should be or shouldn't be, because it's non-dualistic. But we're looking for that because we're on one side of the fence and we're afraid to go over into the other side because we're afraid we'll get lost over there. So we do everything we can to rationalize why we're on side of the fence, why this is the truth, because it's become familiar to us. So this idea that confirmation bias, this confirmation bias then is not necessarily a sign of strong convictions. It's a sign of convictions we're not really sure about, but we need to believe. So there's a difference between needing to believe something and actually believing something. There's a difference between needing something to be a certain way and then actually seeing and experiencing it the way it is. So that's where our perceptions do, right? So we do have that. And William James was bang on that. So confirmation bias, then I'm going to get that question again to make sure I said it right. How does it hold us back? It holds us back from allowing us to see the whole truth. If we're not open-minded and we're closed-minded about a certain thing, then we will not explore the other avenue completely. We'll be more concerned with proving it not true than we will with the possibility that it is true. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, what if it is true? We're so worried about it, this kind of, what if it isn't true? I don't know what will happen to me. Instead of saying, wow, what if it was true? What if this was true? Imagine what life would be like. We get concerned and we fear, what the other side of our bias is going to be all about. So we stop exploring, we stop being open, we stop experimenting with all that life can give us, and we're very short-sighted and we spend a great deal of our effort and energy into proving that our convictions and our confirmations and our idea of truth is right. And whose idea of truth is this idea of truth I hold? It's little me's. And what's little me? A real fragile little ego that can be blown out in a second, which probably should be blown out in a second. But we cling to it because we see that as our identity. We see our convictions and our beliefs as our identity. So we're so afraid to let go of them. So afraid to see the possibility that what we're believing and seeing as truth is maybe not necessarily truth. Maybe there's more to it. And there's always more to it, right? There's always more to it. This universe and this understanding of it is so vast that we just don't have the intellectual capacity and these little human minds to understand it all. And I keep thinking of that beautiful quote that Albert Einstein wrote in a letter he wrote to a friend who had lost somebody. And he was more or less quoting Spinoza at the time, because Spinoza was someone he really identified with, even though he said he wasn't a pantheist. He kind of identified with those ideations that Spinoza had so many centuries before had passed on to the world. But in this one quote, he's saying it's like walking into a library and seeing all these shelves of books, all written in different languages, not understanding the languages, not understanding the books, not being able to read all those books, just knowing that they're all ordered in a certain way, and there is somebody in there that can read those books, understands those books, possibly written all the books, and understands the order of all those books. But with our human minds, all we can say is, wow, that's a lot of books. And we have to come to the point in our lives where we're ready to accept the fact that we'll never know everything, and it's okay not to know everything. But when we have our confirmation bias, it's one of the parts of the identity we're clinging to is this idea that I know this to be true. So we cling into that intellectual conceptual knowledge that we have, or that identity as a conceptual being. And it's so important to us that we don't want to let it go. So we can't look at the other side and explore it deeply. We're stuck trying to rationalize our own point of view rather than be open-minded to see the other point of view. And again, that's because of fear of what will happen if, I lose that part of myself. We're so attached to our identities and so attached to these little ideas of who we are. And if a knower and a conceptual being is part of that we think who we are, we don't want to see the possibility that our concepts are just that, concepts, pointers. They're not truth, and that there's more to truth. We've got a big library to explore, and it's beyond us. We're not responsible for that library and what's up there. We're so have capacity to understand so little of it, and it's okay. One of the biggest things we can do as we go on this path is come to terms with the fact that we'll never know everything, and it's okay that we don't know everything. As I progress on this journey, the more I thought I knew, I realize now that the less I knew. I know so very little, and I'm learning finally to be okay with the fact that I don't know, I don't understand everything, and so therefore that reduces a lot of my confirmation bias. And it opens me up to the possibility of absolutely everything, which is quite an awesome state of being. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing day. Namaste.